Good morning, everyone. Sorry for firing. Well, I guess it is right at 10 o'clock here. I felt like I was running late today. Right, all right, all right. Get all my windows in order here. Dun, dun,
dun. Give it a little time for everybody to come rolling in.
That's right. It's early. I get it.
30.
Especially if you're a West Coaster.
Absolutely.
Let's see.
All right.
Good morning.
Looks like we're at a pretty solid 30, Steve.
Yeah, I feel like this is tapered off. All right, so as we begin, my name's Steve McCary. I'm the application engineer down here out of South Texas. I live in the Houston area. I cover Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and New Mexico. Joining me today is the Dan Waltons. You should put "the" in front of your name in Zoom. Everybody knows Dan Waltons. Dan's our national training manager or director? Manager. Okay.
Well, it's not a matter of preference. Oh, okay. It's a matter of the time.
Very well then. If that's what the card says, that's what the card says.
Exactly right.
So Dan heads up all of our training initiatives here, and we're happy to have him here.
Yeah, today. Absolutely.
It's been a little while since we've
done one of these. Been a lot of traveling. So there's just as a 100-foot view. If we got a couple seconds, we'll wait for a few more people come in. We're not too far away from opening up a nice training and experience center down in Austin, Texas. It'll be a first of a handful that you'll see that will come across the country. Along with that, we've got some great initiatives. You know, we've hired close to 100 people since the beginning of the year. With their change to go-to-market strategies. So you're going to see those local application engineers multiplying in great numbers, and hopefully see some of them in your offices giving great talks like this, relevant about the MTR, how to design with our core nano and the things like that. But yeah. And thank you guys for taking the time and coming out, sitting down and joining this webinar. So. Steve, I'll let you take it from there. So feel free to drop questions in the Q&A. I'll try to answer them, or at least tap Steve and have him pause, and we'll go through that way. And but yeah, I'll hand it over to you, Steve. Thanks.
Yes. So, a lot of this is going to be done out of a slide deck. Some of these webinars, if you've been to a bunch of them, some of them, we're actually in Designer doing stuff. Some of them are just slide decks and we're talking conceptually. This is going to be more of a slide deck one. But there will be a lot of information. So if you feel like we have blasted by a question you have, or if something doesn't 100% make sense, absolutely just pop a question in there, and we don't want to leave anybody behind, because what we'll do as we go through some of these designs is we're going to define the space, and then we're sort of going to build the space out conceptually. So I don't want to lose anybody at the beginning of the concept. And then have you feel like you didn't get anything out of this. So please don't be shy. Interrupt us. Okay.
I think unabated, the content goes 35 minutes. So there's plenty of time to ask questions, guys. 35 to 40 if you're just talking it and flipping slides. So please ask questions.
Depends on how fast I talk, I suppose.
Well, that's true.
Oh, yes. As always, you will receive within about the next 7 to 10 days, you will receive an email. Everyone who signed up for this webinar will receive an email where you will get a recording of this entire session. So thank you for bringing that up. I usually try to remember to bring that up. Okay, so today we are talking about Q-SYS and the integration with Microsoft Teams. And we're going to talk about that in two kind of different concepts. So There are two different applications when we start to talk about Teams. The first is Teams Desktop. This is the program that you run on your laptop or your desktop in your office. If you're me, this is what I run on my computer here at the house. It has pretty much it's the full functionality of Teams, right? I can chat. This is how Dan and I talk throughout the day. We can send each other meetings. We can call each other. We can drop files. You can create teams. I mean, if you're in here and you're looking at this, you pretty much know how Microsoft Teams as a concept works. So Teams Desktop is that application that you use every day. The next iteration of that is what's called a Teams Room. So this is a conference room that is always on. It exists as its own entity within your Teams environment. You can have meetings and calls in there. You can present through it. It's got very basic, simple functionality on a UCI. One-touch join on meetings, which is one of the biggest differences or one of the biggest attractors for this. You've got your meeting controls in there. You've got some HDMI content sharing that you can do. It's a really nice and simple and streamlined way to host a Teams meeting in a room with other people. So Teams Desktop, this is more of a BYOD, bring your own device type of situation. Teams Room means that room is always ready to host the Teams meeting, and nobody needs to bring anything special in with them. Okay, so we just kind of covered this, but the desktop app, it gives you your personal notifications. You control it with a mouse and keyboard. You get to pick the device. You've got a little bit of flexibility in as far as how you use the app and what you do. We call this a 3-foot experience. You're always kind of, within 3 foot of the device kind of a thing. And then once we get into Teams Room, we can break that out a little bit. We've got a compute that we can mount in a remote location and just have our touch panel up on the table. It's a little bit quicker to get up and running because it's already there. You can still hook up somebody's device and do some in-room content sharing. You've got full frame cameras included since it's a Teams meeting room. More importantly, you've got some system security and some central management options there that the IT departments generally appreciate. And a Teams room compute will support up to 2 front of room displays. Whereas when you're just doing a BYOD Teams Desktop, you're really just single display applications. A couple of things that every Microsoft Teams room will need. First thing, most important thing is the compute device. So we'll call these the MTR compute or just the compute. This runs Windows 10 Enterprise and a specific Microsoft Teams room application. It is paired with a controller. The controller is what actually sits in the room. It's what you interact with. And it is paired back with the compute. Also have to have a way to do HDMI ingestion. A lot of the controllers, well, like the Logitech Tab, the HDMI ingestion is actually done at the controller. So that makes that really easy. But really, it just has to be any certified control surface. So this can be a tap, this can be a Lenovo Smart Controller, this can be a Flex. As long as it's certified and works with the compute that you have in there, then that's all you need. The last thing is the correct audio and video peripherals for the space. So we'll get into what Teams Room certification means right now. So Microsoft goes through and certifies room solutions. So these are combinations of equipment that Microsoft has said, yes, if you put this in and you use them in, if you use these pieces of equipment with these pieces of equipment, we will certify the fact that this room will operate with Teams and it will do it in exactly the way we meant for it to work. One of the real benefits of using Q-SYS along with your MTR is the fact that over a single USB connection, not only can we get the audio feed out of the room and into the compute for the meeting and back again for the far side audio to come back in, but we can also get our cameras. The video from our cameras will show up as the camera connection inside your Teams call. This is a really neat part about how this works. So let's start to look at some of the parts and pieces that we're going to use. The first is this compute device. This is what everything gets built around, is this compute device. So this is our Windows 10 Enterprise, our MTR application. It sits on the network and it gets paired with a Q-SYS core processor. Again, the Q-SYS cores and the Q-SYS platform, they're all built around standard Ethernet connections. It's all the services and ports and network traffic. It's all very clearly spelled out. And by using a core processor and an MTR compute together, what we get is we end up with a system that's really easy to scale, because all we need to do is just add some Q-SYS network peripherals and we can really start to expand the system. Okay, so let's talk about how we're going to control it. So the MTR compute will generally have a control device paired with it, or it always will, not generally, it does. In the examples that we're going to show throughout this, we're going to be showing this done with a Logitech Tap, and we're going to show this connected to the compute device via USB. Logitech has a couple of different options for how to extend that USB between the compute and the Tap. Generally just USB extenders, but they've got some specific solutions for how to do that. You don't want to just go grab willy-nilly any kind of a USB extender. You want to use the specific ones they recommend. So anyway, we've got our Teams controller, and this is going to give us all of our call control as well as our in-room AV controls, and it all happens out of a single device. So the next thing we're going to add in is we're going to add in some audio. So Q-SYS has paired up with Sennheiser to offer Teams certified solutions. And we have a plugin inside of Designer that works really well with the Sennheiser, the TCC2. It works well with our automatic camera preset recall plugin. The fact that it only needs one channel of AEC is a real benefit. And the other nice part about this is when you start to talk about Teams certified peripherals and endpoints, QSC as a company has the largest array of Teams certified products. So this goes all the way through to our ceiling speakers, our pendant speakers, our surface mount speakers, some of the column line arrays. We are currently in the process of having the network loudspeakers. So that's the ceiling, the pendant, and the sound bar. Those are all well on their way through certification right now. SPA amplifiers, CXQ amplifiers, those are already certified. The soon to be released SPA-Q, those are in the middle of being certified right now. So all of this goes together to create what they call the certified audio path. So that's what we're showing on here is we've got an SPA-Q or a CXQ on here, along with you can choose out of any number of certified speakers to complete this audio path. So the last bit in this is video. So we're going to have video traveling to and from our Teams room compute. And we're going to do that by using a combination of HDMI ingest. We're going to do that with putting our cameras on, and using that USB bus. And then we've also got some USB endpoints. We've got an IO USB, but then all of the processors and the video endpoints, those all have USB bridges on there that we can also use to bring this audio and video to and from the Teams room compute.
Hey, Steve.
All right. Yeah.
We had a question here. So the solutions are great, but can you please address product availability for each of the products you've mentioned? We can't install what's available. Well, that's a very dynamic situation. Obviously, it changes day to day depending on the fact, as we've seen over the last year or so, somebody else runs out of amplifiers and we think we're ready to fill all the coming up orders, and then someone switches over and buys 400 amplifiers from us. So we're averaging a lot of the content that you'll see coming out. The processor, the Core 110 has been pushed out just a little bit. We're recommending a lot of people look at the Core Nano as a processor in there. Some of our loudspeakers have not had an issue being in stock, and the amplifiers are averaging, there's different amplifiers will come through and in and out. So I recommend reaching out to your local application engineer in your region or your sales area manager and check in on availability with that though. But we have been having a very fluid, we've shipped close to 90% of everything that people have ordered over the last, last year. So anyways, so that's kind of the answer for that one. I figured it was easier than typing an answer.
Yeah, and the other side of that issue is, we're going to cover a whole bunch of parts and pieces today. And quite honestly, Dan and I deal with this on a daily basis, as do all the salespeople and application engineers in here. Our supply chain team is working tirelessly to get us every part and piece that they can. And even though we may get a report on a Monday that gives us dates, honestly, by Tuesday or Wednesday, that report may already be out of date. And a lot of times what we've seen happen is, we get into positions and it's like, oh, okay, well, good. We're actually going to move that one up. Okay, well, now, something's happened. We got to move this back. So I would say it's really more on a case by case basis. As you start to design systems and you start to try to look at what parts and pieces that you do want to use, it's very easy. Just shoot an email over to your application engineer and we can usually get you an answer back within, hopefully that day, depending on when you sent it, and just say, look, here are the current dates that I'm showing availability for all these different parts. So that's the easiest way to go through that.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions before we start to put a system together here? Awesome. All right. So the first one that we're going to look at is going to be our large boardroom. This is going to be a room that has probably more than one ceiling mic involved. We're going to have a couple of speakers in there. We're going to have a camera or two. We're going to have multiple displays, and we're going to have an MTR compute and a controller. So that's what we're going to build around. First things first, we're going to address the audio. So what we've got here is one of our Q-SYS NS series switches. These are our Netgear enterprise grade switches. The differentiator being that we preload them with profiles that automatically are configured to pass the multicast video for NV32s, Dante, AES67, QLAN. They've already set up. QoS is already set up. All of that's already done. And for those of you who have looked at any of our clocking or any of our network classes, you know that can sometimes be a little bit of a pain. So if you're doing something and you do have the opportunity to provide your own switch, we do have some switches available just to try to make that one less pain point that you have to deal with. All right, so second thing we've got in here is a core processor. And then we have an SPA amplifier. So our SPA amplifier is going to drive some surface mount loudspeakers, as well as a couple of ceiling speakers in the room. And then as our input side, we've got a Sennheiser TCC2, and that's going to be coming in off the network. Probably a Dante channel here. The good news is most of the cores come with a Dante license, so you don't have to worry about that. You know, the NV32 doesn't, but the rest of them do. So you should be ready to go. We'll just take all this stuff right out of the box, hook it up, and we've got input and output. We've got our processor, we've got our switch. So in this scenario, we're building this room around the idea that inside the credenza, we have underneath the display that we've got room to put our equipment. So that's why you'll see some stuff over in the credenza and some stuff at the conference table. Okay, so now we want to add some camera video. So we're going to add a camera into the room. Now, we are just showing one camera in this example, but this could be one camera in every corner that you switch in. This could be a couple of pairs of cameras that are working as primary and secondary using our automatic camera preset recall plugin that we've got. You know, the downside is we are going to cut you off somewhere around 250 cameras per core processor. So as long as you can manage to get this room done with less than 250 cameras, we are definitely the solution for you. All right, so again, camera, use as many of them as you need or want. And now let's get into our compute and our controller. So we're going to put our compute is going to go in the credenza, and we are going to use the USB bridging port on the core. This is what we're going to use as our USB bridge to that Microsoft Teams room compute. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to get a USB from the Teams room compute out to the controller. Depending on which core processor you're using, will kind of determine how you're going to do that bridging, but for the most part, it's all pretty straightforward. The rest of this could actually be done, since we're showing the SPA amplifier on here as well, which is an analog amplifier. We could also do this with a nano and a QIO for some analog outputs, and get by just fine on this. So we can talk about some of the other, you know, redesigns as we talk about supply chain as we go through this. Okay, so now we've got our compute and our controller in. Let's add a little bit of video. So when we start to work with the NV32, we have the two modes that we can run our NV32 in. We can run them as an encoder, or we can run them as a decoder. So what we're looking at in this example is we have a decoder that we are sitting in the credenza. And then we've got an encoder that we are sitting at the conference table. So when an NV32 is in encoder mode, it has 3 HDMI inputs that we can stream out to 3 separate NV32 decoder outputs in the system. This is at 1080p. And when we're in encoder mode, we can also have HDMI 1 output one of those local connections can come out. So we can use it like a 3x1 video switcher. So the NV32 runs on PoE++. The switches that we have will put out PoE++, or there are models that will. Otherwise, you can use a PoE++ injector. There is also a way to hook them up with an external power supply. We don't sell one, but they're fairly readily available that you can hook up and power an NV32 that way. So in our situation here, our NV32 encoder that we've got at the table, we're going to encode and stream the two laptop connections in the in-room PC, but we're also going to use the HDMI output. So we're going to combine our encoding with our local 3x1 switching, and we're going to send that output to the HDMI ingest on our Teams Room controller. So what that means is that any of those three devices that are at the table can be used in a Teams meeting to share content.
Steve, can we pause for a question? We have a question here of, can you clarify what the operate with any PoE power option does to the functionality of NV32H? The operating with any PoE, so typically you're going to want to make sure that your PoE++ 802.1 type 4 BT, I believe, something like that. So it's a 90 watt required power supply. So there is, I know you can select a lower value, but it's gonna impede how that works. So do you have anything to add to that, Steve, or did I misstate?
No, I was trying to see if I could find the actual verbiage.
Yeah, okay.
Because I know I've seen it, but I just can't remember exactly.
I can take a look into that. I'll look into that while you move forward, and I'll find it in the help file and whatnot, what that does. So
the LED
out loud, I was like, oh, I see what he's asking now.
Oh, that has to do with there are certain switches that may not properly negotiate the 802.3 BT type 4 standard. So even though the switch port is putting out 90 watts, for whatever reason, the NV32 will throw an error because the switch is not actually negotiating the type 4 standard. And it's essentially just a bypass for that. That's what that means. It's something that you can enable, and it'll just make the, I mean, obviously you have to confirm that it is up and it's running, and the switch is capable of putting out 90 watts. But if it's just not negotiating properly, you can essentially quash that negotiation error.
Perfect. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So back in our example here, so we're using the encoder at the table. We're going to put those streams on the network. We're going to use that as a 3x1. And then we've got a decoder in the room. And what we're doing with that is we're going to use that to feed our, or we're going to use that to receive and send video to our dual displays. So we can also use this, again, because encoders and decoder mode on an NV32 still allows you to use the local inputs. We can take the output of the Teams Room compute and feed that into the HDMI 1 on the decoder, and we can still switch that to our two displays in the room, as well as receiving our views. So this is where an NV32 becomes really really powerful is that we can combine the 3x1 switching with the MediaCast feeds, and coming soon to 9.5, they're slated to come soon to 9.5, don't hold my feet to the fire, is the ability to take the camera feeds and put them out of HDMI 1 to be able to actually show the cameras down in HDMI. So this will work for if you need to do recording, or if you need to use some kind of a hard codec for something, or if you just want to put in-room cameras up on a display. Okay, so what we're doing now is this decoder can be switched over to the into a BYOM mode to pull the feeds from the table, or it can be in our sort of local switching mode, which is where our compute is feeding our monitors. So let's now move in, and we're going to talk about our BYOD connections. So we've got a USB-B port on the NV32, as well as the HDMI that we've already got. So we're going to leverage that so that we can use one of these laptop connections at the table as a BYOD conferencing device. So this gives us the ability to have somebody come into the room and grab this, use a cable cubby or whatever it is, and they can take the HDMI and the USB, tag it into their laptop, and now they can host a meeting. And now they have access to all of the audio and the video and all of that that's in there, where they can use the cameras as the camera. They can use the TCC2 as the microphone. They can use the outputs as the for their speakers. They can do all of that, and then they can share locally from their laptop. So again, this is where all these connections on the NV32 really start to stretch their legs, and we can leverage this USB bridging port. And now we've just added BYOD into a into this system. So the next thing we're going to look at is this room control. We keep talking about this room controller and what we can do with it. So in this instance, we've got a Logitech Tap, and we're running an MTR system. And this screen, this UCI that you see on here, is actually a UCI that's developed inside Q-SYS Designer. So inside Microsoft Teams, you've got your Teams experience with your one-touch join and scheduling and call controls and all of that. And then there's a way that you can get into what's called the second page. So this is the second page experience, as you'll hear people use that term a lot. And what's really interesting about how Q-SYS works with this is a Q-SYS UCI that you're looking at. It's just styled with CSS to look exactly like the Teams room interface. So, and we include all of this, the CSS file, this UCI, it's all in Asset Manager for you to pull down. There are sample files for you to use. And with this, now we can leverage the control capabilities out of the Q-SYS core to turn the display on and off. NV32s can do basic CEC commands, power on, power off, things like that. Or you can use the RS-232 port on an NV32. We can, do some lighting control. We can do some environmental HVAC control. I mean, anything that you can control, throw the Somfy plugin on there and run your shades up and down. There's all kinds of stuff that we can do at this point, because now we're using this tap controller essentially as a Q-SYS touch panel, because we're just talking straight to the core and to the products. Now, what this also gives us that's really neat is that we get camera preview. So now you can see what your camera is seeing. You can manually switch between the different cameras that you've got in the room. And again, slated for 9.5 is full motion video on the controller. So we've already got full motion video for the generation 3, the third generation touch panels and UCI viewer. This will bring it to the MTR controllers. Yes is the answer to the question that just got on here. So the MTR and the core do have to have a network connection between the two as well. But because most of the core processors have multiple network interfaces, you can create a LAN with the switch and all of that for your NV32s and for your cameras and all of that, and then use one of the secondary ports to go onto the customer's LAN and then communicate with the MTR compute that way. And that's a very popular way to do it, because, again, one of the really cool advantages of Q-SYS is that we can go and turn services and ports on and off per NIC. So if they want that NIC that sits on their LAN that's going to talk to their MTR compute, if they just want it to do that, we can shut off everything except for what we need to talk to that MTR compute. All right, I hope that answered that question as we move through. Okay, so just to recap what we've done in this boardroom. We've got a switch and a core and our Teams compute sitting in our credenza. We've got our SPA series amplifier running our speakers. We've got an NV32 that's sitting in decoder mode, although it's decoder / local switching mode. That's bringing our Teams compute, our compute device into the system. That's also allowing us to bring our 3 devices from the table into our system and stream those back and forth. We've got a TCC2 microphone. We've got any number of our Q-SYS, PTC, or NC series conferencing cameras. And then we've got our NV32 encoding sitting at the conference table, and then our mighty little Teams room controller sitting on the conference table. Any questions before I shift gears into Divisible space? Once, twice, thrice. Okay, so the next scenario that we're going to look at is for a divisible or multi-purpose room. So Andy, I'm going to answer your question. Does Microsoft limit you to being in the second page for no more than 60 seconds like they do on the Crestron Flex? We have a unique ability to be able to trigger that flip, which means that we can stay in that second page if needed. How's that for an answer?
It's very non-committal, but
isn't it though?
Yes.
Andy, send me an email after this and I'll be happy to show you that. All right, so now we're going to look at a divisible room. So each of these 2 rooms, A and B, they're both going to have some speakers, a microphone, an MTR compute, a controller, display or displays, camera, all of that stuff. The setup is essentially what we just did in a room, only we're going to again leverage these advantages of having a centralized core processor run these rooms, in that when you take that air wall out, we can make this one big system. Now, we're just going to show this as a 2-way. It could easily be 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever it is. And we'll get into exactly how this works. Okay, so same thing that we talked about earlier, right? At the heart of this whole system is going to be a switch, and a nano. So pick a room, any room. Let's assume there's an equipment room tucked behind these two rooms. But we're going to have this network switch and a nano, and those are going to be universal between the two rooms. So we're going to have a TCC2 in each room. And this time we're actually going to skip over the analog outputs. We're going to skip over the amplifier and all of that. And we're going to skip right to network series loudspeakers, or NL series networkable loudspeakers in here. So this would be the NLC4 is the ceiling model, or it could be the P4, which is the pendant, or my favorite little buddy, the SB42, which is our little networkable soundbar. All right, so now we're going to add a camera into each room. Again, like we said last time, we're showing one, could be 10. The number of cameras becomes irrelevant. We just want to show the fact that we can pull in any number of cameras and combine them as we get into, as we take the air wall out and make this one room. Again, because what we're going to do, because we're going to have these rooms, each room is going to be bridged to the MTR compute. Once we combine them, because all of these cameras are running into the same nano, we can then combine the number of cameras when we combine the rooms. So that's the big takeaway on this. All right, so each room will have an MTR compute and a controller. So the one thing to remember when we start to do these divisible rooms and combining and all of that stuff, the issue that you'll run into is the fact that Microsoft does not give you the ability to combine rooms within computes and controllers. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to pick one that's going to be your primary when the rooms are combined. Now, here's the beauty of having all of this run into a single Q-SYS processor. It could be either one. You can have two scenarios. You can have a scenario where I'm going to combine these rooms and I'm going to use room A as my join, or I'm going to combine these rooms and I'm going to use B as my join. It doesn't matter. You just can only use one at a time. So if you join with room B, then just room B's touch controller is the one that's going to work as far as your call controls and all that stuff goes. So that's the only limitation, if you will, on doing combined rooms with MTR. Okay, let's add some video in. So we're going to put in a lectern in each room. We're going to put our MTR compute. We've already got our controller sitting there, and we're going to have two NV32s. So we're going to have one of them is going to be in encoder mode. So like we said earlier, one of the benefits of having an MTR system versus just using BYOD and desktop is that you get dual display capabilities out of it. So we're going to run two feeds out of this MTR compute into the input side of this encoder. We're also going to have available in a cable cubby an HDMI for a BYOD add-on into this room. And then also we're going to have a decoder sitting in that room, and we're going to do a couple of things out of that decoder. The first of which is we're going to receive network streams from the MTR compute or from the BYOD laptop. You'll also notice that on our left side over here, we have another NV32 encoder that we're going to use for, let's say, immersive solstice or a Barco click share. We'll also have an in-room PC if somebody wanted to do just some very basic content presentation in there. So our decoder in room A is going to do two things out of its outputs. It's going to give us our feed for our HDMI ingest for our Microsoft Teams room controller for our presentation. It's also going to feed a confidence monitor that we're going to put up there. And the beauty of having this being two separate outputs on an NV32 is that those can be different things. You can send one thing to the HDMI ingest and have another be up there on that confidence monitor. So the last thing that we're going to cover, we're also going to have we've also got just a passive HDMI plate in that room, and that can be run with like an HD base T extender or something like that back to that encoder in the equipment room. So that will use our three inputs on that encoder. Okay, so let's go through, and now let's talk about our little BYOD add-on that we put in here. So we're using the decoder, we're using the USB port out of the decoder to tie into our MTR compute that's in the room. But because every NV32 has a bridge on it, we can now use the encoder in the lectern. We can use its USB port to do BYOD right there at the lectern, so they can have full access to the USB bridge. And back in the equipment room, we can use the bridge port on that NV32 for the in-room PC. So what we've just done is now we have 3 different places where we can host a fully functioning meeting complete with audio and video peripherals. So we can send the cameras out to any of those USBs. We can send that TCC2 in as the microphone. We can use our output to go to our network loudspeakers. All of this is all happening over the network and through the ability for us to do some bridging. But could there be anything cooler that happens? Yes, there could. NV32s, as well as some of the other peripherals that we have USB-A ports on them. We can actually set up remote KVM for that in-room PC. So you could hook up a mouse keyboard combo with a USB-A, put that into the USB-A port on the back of one of those 2 NV32s. And since we've already got a bridge set up between the NV32 in the equipment room and the PC, all that's left is to bring in an HID block, and we can now, or I'm sorry, the USB block, and we can connect those USB ports and use it as a KVM extender as well. So lots of features packed in to these USB ports that are on the back of the NV32s and on the backs of these cores. It's a lot of lifting that goes on, but it all gets routed in and out of Designer, and it is super simple to work with. So the last question I'm going to address, so that'll come up in a minute. Okay, so let's look at some other ideas as we get into a second page experience for this combined room. One of the other things, and you kind of can't see it on this screenshot, but it is really slick, where you just see those squares under room A or room B for the Teams camera select or the BYOD camera select. So those are the buttons that you use to pick what camera is coming out of each of those USB bridges, because each of those bridges is routable separately. You can send one thing to the bridge. You can send one camera to the bridge of the MTR. You can send a different camera to the bridge of the BYOD. Like, they're not tied together. They're all unique. But what's really cool is you get a snapshot. It's a 1 frame a second snapshot of what that camera is seeing as a thumbnail on the selection buttons. And right now, or in 9.4 and below, that camera preview is just a 1 second JPEG scrape, but come 9.5, that'll be full motion as well. The The buttons will continue to be 1 second, but that camera preview block will become full motion 30 frame video so that you can see in real time what your camera is seeing and what's being sent to your far end. So you can also have camera presets on here. And we didn't really cover this earlier, but in the second page experience, just because we say you can send, just because we call it a second page, doesn't mean that everything has to be on one page. So you'll notice right here, we've got video sources, camera control, room control, excuse me. These can all be different layers. So you can work in and out of multiple pages worth of controls. And I'll tell you one even cooler. We can actually switch which UCI gets sent to the second page experience on a tap based on if you're in a BYOD mode or if you're running Teams. So the NV32 has the ability to see sync on its HDMI ports. So if you hook up to that BYOD connection at the lectern, we know that you've connected that USB and that you've connected that HDMI. And we can actually have this tap switch over to the second page and load a completely different UCI that looks different and has different controls for when you're in BYOD mode. It's a visual indicator to the user that I'm in a different mode. We can use a different style sheet and have it not be black and purple like Teams. You can have it be styled to fit the actual client's scheme. And then once that's disconnected, we can have it kick back into Teams mode, if you will. So lots of power, lots of versatility, lots of things that we can do coming in and out of these modes, and all just by connecting an HDMI or a USB, because we can see when those events happen. Okay, moving on. Let's look over this room that we've just built. Excuse me. In the equipment room, we have our Nano, the little processor that could. We've got our network switch. We've got our Solstice or our ClickShare. We've got an NV32 that's doing all manner of things. It's encoding the wireless. It's encoding the in-room. It's encoding that the in-room PC. It's encoding that HDMI plate. It's a bridge. It's KVM. It's, I don't even know what all, but it's busy. All right, in room A, now we've got our camera or cameras. We've got BYOD, we've got MTR, we've got MIC, KEY, MOUSE, we've got NL loudspeakers, we've got a TCC2. I should have been in the military for as much as I love throwing around acronyms.
Don't you mean
I would have ended up in the OWCA though, for any of you that get the reference of the organization without a cool acronym.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, you're sure using a lot of TLAs, 3-letter acronyms.
I certainly am. Yes, the OWCA is my personal favorite.
OWCA, I like that. Thanks, Steve. I'm adding that to the queue.
All right, so we've got our Team Connect mic in there. We've got an NV32 that's feeding the display. And the other really cool thing to remember is that, so we have two displays. We have a display in each room in this scenario. But when we remove the air wall, now suddenly we have two displays in the room. The NV32, in addition to doing all these other really cool things that I brought up, the NV32 has the ability to kill sync on one of its outputs or on one of its inputs. So what we can do in this scenario, where we've got the two feeds coming from the MTR compute into that encoder, we can actually turn off the sync on that second input when the room is separated and only has one display. And this will make the MTR compute think that there is only one display in the room. So it operates in one display mode. Once we take the air wall out and we combine the room, What we can do is we can turn the sync back on for whichever that compute is that we're using. And now we get the MTR compute in dual display mode. So we can run that and have our participants on one screen and our content on the other, like you would in dual display mode. So this is yet another reason or another feature where these NV32s become super powerful by putting some of them into a room. Now, in this example, we show 2 NV32 decoders, one for each display. That may not be necessary. If the rooms are small enough, or if you just want to put an HD base T extender on there and don't need, 232 control for each TV individually like this, or however it is you want to do it, you could just as easily put one NV32 decoder in and push the 2 monitors that way. If you need more serial control, I highly recommend the Q-SYS. That has 4 serial ports on it that you could use to turn TVs on and off. Lots of different options, but I just didn't want you to think that you had to use the 2 decoders like that. You could easily do that out of one. Okay, any questions before I scale this back a little bit and we talk about huddle rooms? What is a Teams Room compute? Is it a prepackaged Microsoft device or is it a generic PC running the Teams Room software? So a Teams compute is something that you buy as a Teams compute. It comes loaded with the Microsoft software on it, and it will generally be shown as partnered or paired with a controller of some sort. So yes, you buy this as a Teams compute. Okay, so now we're going to scale this back a little bit, and we're going to show how we can do this with a huddle space. So I'm gonna kind of breeze through some of the setup stuff. Network switch, a nano. We're using the new network loudspeaker. The soundbar, the NL SB42. We're also showing this with our soon-to-be released NMT1 network microphone. We're also showing this with the NC110, which is our ePTZ camera. The camera does not move, but it does have a 110-degree field of view. So you can put it under a display or above a display, depending on how, heights and whatnot. But it can be mounted under a display, and it's got plenty of field to catch the people at the table right up in front of the display and then catch the whole room. So single camera solution. So now we're going to add in our Teams compute at the table and our tap up on top of the table. And we're not going to use an NV in here. So this is just going to have the HDMI going straight to the TV. And we're going to bridge out of this nano for our Teams Room compute. So the thing I want to show you is a feature that's a little bit unique for the Nano. I believe the Nano and the 8 Flex are the 2 that can do this next feature. We're going to use the same processor. We're going to bridge both the MTR compute and the BYOD. The reason that the Nano and the 8 Flex can do that is because they have a USB-B port as well as a USB-C port. So they have 2 ports on the back of them. The important thing to remember is, number 1, you can't use both of them at the same time. And number 2, you actually can't pick which one you use. So in this situation, we want to hook the MTR compute up to the USB-C, and we want to hook our BYOD up to the USB-B. The reason for this is because in any situation where both are connected, or just in any situation, the USB-B port will take precedence over the USB-C port. So, but we can use this to our advantage to be able to basically make an automatic switch for when you hook up the USB B for the BYOD, it will automatically switch over and take over from the compute. So this is our little huddle space. We can do it all out of a Nano and a microphone, a sound bar, and a camera, and a probably a 10-port switch, and call it a day. We've got ourselves a really nice huddle room MTR with BYOD, and it's a nice, pretty little package.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that fits the small to medium sized rooms, and just it makes a good fit. So there was one question that came up that I thought would be a little easier to answer live, and that was, what is a Teams room compute? Is it a prepackaged Microsoft device, or is it a generic PC running the Teams room software? And
did you take a nap while I answered that?
Oh, did you answer it already?
Yeah. Were you taking a nap?
Oh, I walked out of the room and came back. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. No, and that's not, if you have a different answer from what I have, but I mean, those are devices that you buy as MTR computes.
Yeah, they're paired with a control device. They're certified through Microsoft. They're a unique special part there. So yeah, it's kind of what the first part, the delineating part of the first two slides in the presentation is. Microsoft Teams is what you use on your laptop. Microsoft Teams Room is a dedicated PC and controller pair that are certified through Microsoft, but there are lots of different manufacturers. Dell makes the compute device, HP, name it. So there's several of them out there. So, all right, cool. Thank you, Steve.
So since we're just at 11, I'm going to just bang through these last couple of slides just to put a bow on this. We have a number of tools to help you set up MTR deployments. These are in Asset Manager. You can download our sample file. You can download the CSS file. There's even a little UCI that you can run on a phone to optimize the audio. These do, however, require the or something to mention is that all of this that we have showed today requires the feature license for Microsoft Teams Rooms. And the reason for that is you're using scripting to do second page and talk back and forth with the MTR compute. And you are using, you're also using scripting for the plugin for the TCC2 and any ACPR that you're doing. And then you're obviously using UCIs to serve up that second page experience. So the Q-SYS feature license for Microsoft Teams Room, it's listed as a single entry on your price guides, but it is just a bundle that is the scripting license and the UCI license all paired together. We just give it to you as a single line item so that you can bid it out that way. Okay, so we talk about these in other classes. In fact, next week we're going to build on this concept, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but just know that you've got Reflect Enterprise Manager that you can use to remotely do some of these changes for like combining and separating rooms. And then we can also integrate in, speaking of Teams, we can create webhooks that will send notifications through your organization into specific Teams channels. Last is a snippet of our team certified portfolio. This is changing every day as we speak. The list keeps growing. We have a bunch of stuff that has actually just been shifted to the last phase of certification. A lot of our new stuff has, so that's going to keep going. All right, I'm going to stop sharing so that I can answer these last couple of questions. Maybe I missed this, but Designer 9.4 only has the Logitech Tap in as an MTR controller option. You mentioned any MTR control surface will work. Is this a 9.5 add? I didn't realize that it was mentioned specifically.
I think what you said was in these examples we're using the Logitech Tab.
Yeah, I
But
mean, we can do second page on any controller. We can do it on a Flex. We can do it on the Lenovo. We can do it on any of them. So yeah,
it's
it can
part
be
of
done
the
on any
whole.
of them.
Yeah, the way I look at it is if it's certified as a compute and control device, a Windows based. Right now, there's a Microsoft
Yes.
limit of why we can't do it on Android based control devices, control surfaces. But if it's a certified Windows based compute and control device, our second page experience will work there. So yeah.
The other one, any additional licensing from Microsoft for the second page or just from us? No, nothing from them, just from us to be able to serve that UCI onto the second page.
Yeah, and it's
How many? Okay, and then this last question is a question that we get a lot, and I want to clarify this. So I just talked about a few slides ago about the license bundle for Microsoft Teams rooms. Okay. This is not a license to run a Teams room with a core. The license is for using UCIs and scripting on that core. So the question is, how many MTR licenses can a core handle? If I have a core running 3 rooms, do I need a license for each? No is the answer. What you're doing is you're bringing in an MTR block out of the inventory, and you are assigning that block via IP to an MTR compute. So you can easily put 3 of those onto a core and just run one license bundle for that core. So it's another reason why doubling up rooms to a processor can help you, because you only have to license that core once. I don't know what that last question was. It popped up. I think it was something about the NMT1, which I'm assuming is, are we certified with the NMT1 yet? And the answer is all of the new stuff, the NL speakers, the NMT1, the NC series cameras, all of that stuff is currently going through certification. It just takes forever to get certified.
Yeah, so you'll see and part of my answer was that along with the network loudspeakers, so the new NC camera, the NMT1, and the network loudspeakers, you'll be seeing those available in the newest, in the upcoming versions, and also they're going through what they call dog fooding right now. So there you go.
Yeah, and if you go to Q-SYS.com, up at the top, there is actually there's a whole tab up there that says alliances and partnerships. And you can go down to our Microsoft Teams partnership page, and you can find a list of everything that is currently certified. Because trust me, as things get certified, we put it on there because we want to show off that our stuff is certified. There are also some solution guides. There are some application guides on how to do things. There's some videos. There's all kinds of stuff. If you go into the alliances and partnerships page and go into Teams and look at that.
Can I answer this one live? Any additional licensing from Microsoft for second page, kind of along the lines there, but also I wanted to just say, so the license, and you just restated because I think you said it as well. There's a Microsoft Teams license you install, but it is simply the UCI and the scripting engine license bundled together because Microsoft said we need to sell it that way. So that's really all we need to have. If your core already has, if you're going back into an existing room and it already has a UCI and a scripting license, you don't have to add the bundle of the Microsoft one. So, or if it had a scripting license and you now need to add a UCI, you can just add a UCI and the MTR room will find there. So, and then our last one there, Steve.
Yeah, are there any plans to do a similar webinar focusing on Zoom rooms? So Zoom rooms is quite different in the way that it's done. We have some videos on how to configure Zoom room. We've got some white papers and things like that. I don't know that we have plans to write a full-on class for it, but if you want to email Dan or me, we can send you the information on how to configure Zoom rooms. Because the other thing with Zoom rooms is it is not nearly as straightforward as doing an MTR system. In a Zoom room, you actually are using the Zoom Room controller to send one-way commands to the core, you are not serving up a page that is actually core initiated. So it requires a little bit more work to get that to work. But I'll be happy to help you with that. Or more appropriately, if you're somewhere else in this great country, I'll be happy to connect you with your application engineer and they can help.
You took the words out of my mouth, Steve.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm really not. I have enough work to do for my 5 states. I'm really not looking to take on the entire country.
Just because you're a legacy deep dive trainer.
I know, right? I'm the last holdover of application engineers that do this. All right. So any other questions? I know Dan does this a lot quicker. I'm starting to realize the trend is that every time I teach, I go over by 10 minutes. And Dan can manage to do this thing in like 35 minutes. So
well, no, that's fine, Steve. I liked your approach, and I think that you headed off a lot of the questions in the dialogue, so it kind of worked out that way. So appreciate it.
All right. Well, again, we're appreciative that you guys take the time out to do these. Obviously we really appreciate, or we really enjoy this product and we enjoy teaching it. And I hope that you guys will feel like you're a little more armed to go in and sit down. But if you feel like you have a customer that really wants to dive in and do this, get with your area manager, get with your application engineer. We love sitting down and doing these. I mean, I was literally in a meeting before this, essentially teaching this class to a customer. So we're always happy to come in and help out with these things. So, and make sure you come back next week and learn how to parlay what you just learned into the other side of Teams, which is having Q-SYS controlled rooms send you notifications in to Teams channels, and then you can leverage that with Reflect to remotely diagnose rooms and troubleshoot rooms and actually send the messages back to the room. There are all kinds of fun stuff that we'll show next week.
Cool. Well, thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next week for scripting webhooks in Microsoft Teams. So you'll be seeing probably in the next week or so. Hey, George, good to see you. In the next week or so, you'll see the September classes get published out there. So looking for probably another round of game structure, some CSS topics, unleashing the core nano. So we're gonna do a little class on that, on how to design with the core nano and the peripherals that we have around it and stuff like that. So good stuff to come in September, guys and gals.
All right, everybody, have a great rest of the week, and we'll see y'all next week.